You wake up in the morning, you don't need someone to tell you that you look good. You don't need someone to tell you that you are valuable. You go in the mirror, you look at yourself, and you say to yourself, you are valuable. You are loved. You are awesome. Right? You are a phenomenon of this entire universe. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. You are worth so much more than you give yourself for. And you don't need someone else to tell you that. You just need to see it. You need to recognize it. Right? Most of us only feel good when people make us feel good. Most of us only feel validated when people validate us. And so their validation becomes a drug. And we become an addict. We're always chasing after people's validation in order to feel good about ourselves. We're always chasing after people's validation in order to confirm our value. Right? We tend to focus on the major addictions, right? The weed, the alcohol, the drugs, the porn. And we forget one small addiction that plagues almost every single one of us. And that addiction is validation. See, here's the thing. The need for validation is a very dangerous addiction. Right? And most of us are not even aware of it. Most of us don't even know that we're always chasing people's validation. Right? And it's dangerous for one main reason. It's dangerous because when you allow someone to be your source of validation, when you allow someone to be your source of self-love, then you also allow that person to be your source of pain and suffering. See, here's the thing. People are fickle. People change like the weather. As a matter of fact, anything external always changes. And when you place your validation, right? Or when your validation is dependent on other people, then what happens when they no longer validate you? What happens when you take away that source of validation? Right? What happens when people no longer speak good about you and when they turn on you? Then you begin to think less of yourself. Then you begin to devalue yourself. But when your validation comes from within, when you validate your own self, right, then you're no longer a puppet to the words and to the actions of other people. Most of us, we don't realize this, but most of us were conditioned. We're conditioned to always seek outside validation. Because think about this. Think about, us as a child, or most people as a child. You did something good and your parents validated you. They probably bought you a new toy. They probably bought you an ice cream. They pat you on the back and they say, good boy or good girl. And so we grow up with that inner child within us, that inner child that is chasing after the validation that our parents once gave to us. And we're now seeking that validation in other people as opposed to our parents. Right? Most of us don't get to the point in which we validate our own selves, in which we become the source of our own validation. Right? But you can't experience true freedom until you begin to validate your own self. Right? You can't get to the point in which you are free until your source of validation comes from within, comes from yourself. Right? Because here's the thing. Everything that is external is subject to change, right? everything outside of you is subject to change. The people in your life right now are temporary. They are subject to change. And so once that source of validation is removed, that is when you fall into this pit of depression, into this pit of self-loathing, into this pit of devaluing yourself. Right? So in order for you to experience true freedom, you have to go within yourself and be your own source of validation. Because when you are your own source of validation, nothing outside of you can disrupt your sense of tranquility and freedom. Nothing outside of you, right, can devalue you. Right? A main reason why most of us chase validation is because we don't really love ourselves. Right? Most of us have not been taught how to cultivate self-love. And I'm saying this obviously based on my own experiences, right? There are large periods of my life, and even today, I still, from time to time, I find myself drifting into that state in which I'm seeking outside validation. But for a large period of my life, the way I felt about myself was dependent on how other people reacted to me. Right? If someone said I was good enough, or if someone said something good about me, I felt good about myself. Or if someone said something bad about me, I felt bad about myself. Or if someone didn't say anything about me at all, I questioned my value. But one day I woke up and I realized that I've been living as a puppet for most of my life. I was a puppet, and other people's validation, or other people, were the puppet master. I was bending to their will, right? I was their puppet. But the only time I felt true freedom, the only times when I felt this inner state of tranquility and peace, right, was when I distanced myself from seeking their validation, and I said to myself, I'm going to validate my own self. I'm going to look myself in the mirror every day, and I'm going to say to myself, you are awesome. You are loved. You are valuable. That was the only time I felt true freedom. Nothing frees you up like internal validation. But the moment you become a puppet to other people's validation, the moment you rely on them to make you feel good about yourself, that's when you're in prison. That's when you're in bondage. Right? You no longer have freedom. See, most of us believe that freedom exists, right, in our external reality, right? And to some degree, I see your point. But true freedom to me exists right up in here and in your heart. I remember reading this book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. And in the book he said, a man can be in prison and be free. And a man cannot be in prison and be in prison. And most of us are free, right? If we're talking about external terms. But most of us are still in prison. Because how we feel about ourselves is dependent on how other people treat us or how other people validate us. So most of us have never truly tasted real freedom. And I'm saying this from experience. I've only began tasting true freedom, just the other day when I began to validate my own self. When I stopped seeking external validation from people. Right? I can't go the rest of my life allowing people to be my source of validation. I want to wake up every day and I want to look in the mirror and I want to say good things to myself, and I want to feel good about myself. Right? See, the need for validation is destroying a lot of people, and we don't even realize it. You go on social media, right? And you see all these women with the BBLs, the lipo, all the cosmetic surgery. And the reason why they're doing all that is because of that need for that external validation, right? They want other people to tell them they look good. They want other people to tell them that they're good. And even the men, right? A lot of guys are on the internet seeking the validation of women and other men, right? Seeking the validation of, celebrities, social media personalities, influencers. If they don't have a certain amount of money, or in a certain tax bracket, or of a certain status, right, then they don't feel good about themselves, right? But nothing outside of you can determine your value. No one can determine your value, right? You are the only person that can determine your value. No one can. The external things that you acquire don't make you valuable, right? True value comes from within. The only reason you are able to achieve those things is because the value existed in you to begin with. What you achieve physically is merely a mirror of what was already within you. And that's what I mean by when I say you have to go within yourself and recognize that the value is in you and will always be in you and was in you all this time. You had to recognize that, right? You have to recognize that. Remember your value. Stop allowing people to be your source of value. So I see all this to say, and I don't want to make this a long video. We need to get to the point in which we start to validate our own selves. We need to get to the point in which we start to go within ourselves and get in touch with our own value. Start validating ourselves. You wake up in the morning, you don't need someone to tell you that you look good. You don't need someone to tell you that you are valuable. You go in the mirror, you look at yourself, and you say to yourself, you are valuable. You are loved. You are awesome. Right? You are a phenomenon of this entire universe. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. You are worth so much more than you give yourself for. And you don't need someone else to tell you that. You just need to see it. You need to recognize it. Right? Most of us don't recognize our own value. We're expecting other people to tell us we're valuable. But you are valuable. You just have to see it. And the moment you begin to validate your own self is the moment you free yourself. Free yourself of the need to have outside validation. Free yourself of the need to have other people tell you that you're good. Right? So free yourself. Be your source of validation. And when you do that, you can find much more peace, much more joy, much more happiness, and much more fulfillment. So thank you guys for watching. Peace and blessings.